is Callie North, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. We're thrilled to have you all join us, whether you're tuning in from your office, your home, or somewhere in between. Thank you for joining us. Before we dive into our discussion today, I'd like to give a brief overview of the Conservation Technology Information Center. So we are a 41-year-old nonprofit organization that champions, promotes, and provides information on technologies and sustainable agricultural systems. We work on a multitude of projects, and you can learn more about those projects at ctic.org. A quick shout out to our members, as well as our partners. And we do have some upcoming CTIC events. I will be putting some links in the chat. So if any of these pique your interest, then you can learn more and register for these events after clicking on the link. We do invite you to join us in Arkansas for the 17th Annual Conservation Action Tour. We'll be there June 10th through the 11th. And this tour is honestly just a great showcase of conservation agriculture. We have a lot of great partners and folks who join us. So you can not only learn from our farmer host, you can learn from the people that are there with you. And just another brief shout out to the sponsors for the tour, because we really couldn't do it without them. So we are going to be listening to a great panel of speakers today. Each of them bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to today's discussion. We're honored to have them join us. So I'm going to welcome Adam Herges, Dr. Scott Manley, and Josh Hankins. They're going to go through their presentation, and then after the presentation, we will be doing a brief Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box, and we'll address them then. So I'm going to start with you, Josh.
All right, everybody hear me? Thumbs up, good to go. Hey, good morning. Thanks for joining. Honored to have the ability to talk a little bit about some of the stuff we've done through the years in our partnership. So Josh Hankins is my name. I am with USA Rice. I am in my 9th year with the organization. I'm based in Little Rock with a co-worker. USA Rice as an organization is HQ'd in Arlington, Virginia, right outside of DC. So our group, staff-wise, we are small but mighty. We have staff that works on international promotions and policy. They help protect and expand our international markets and work to open new ones. We've got a domestic promotion team that helps increase consumption here stateside. We've got policy staff. And then we've got the fun stuff, our conservation and sustainability efforts here on the ground that myself and a coworker do here based out of Little Rock. We do represent all segments of the industry, all parts of the rice supply chain under one roof. So that is a little bit different than a lot of trade organizations. And at only 3 million acres of rice on average a year, we are a pretty small industry compared to most. So next slide, please, Adam. So I did grow up in Arkansas. I spent a lot of time in the Delta and rice country, fighting mosquitoes in the summertime and enjoying the migratory birds in the winter. But I am always surprised by folks across the country and even in Arkansas that have no idea we have rice production here in the U.S. So anytime I'm given the opportunity, I do like to slide a brief U.S. Rice 101 into the conversations. So I'll go through these quick, but some of you might find this interesting. So next slide. So today, more than 3.5 billion people around the world, or nearly half of the world's population, depends on rice for survival. In some countries, rice provides up to 70% of a person's daily calorie intake. Rice is a staple food for more than half of the world's population, and in Asia, Latin America, and parts of Africa, these are the largest consuming regions. Rice is an integral part of many cultures around the world. Because of that, our trade policy has its unique set of challenges. and some say this grain is politically sacred. Some governments in Asia go to great lengths to insulate their rice sectors from the instability of our world markets. And no single food in the West comes close to matching rice's dietary dominance in the East. In the US, rice cultivation can be traced back to 1685, and commercial production began in Louisiana in the late 19th century. We are currently the 5th largest rice exporter and send our rice to over 120 countries. Next slide. So here domestically, 80% of what we eat and drink is grown here. So we still import some, most of which are aromatic varieties such as basmati and jasmine. But our talented breeders here have come a long way in the last decade. We now compete some with those imports. So for those of you out there that are determined to buy an imported basmati, come see me at the tour, or happy to reach out via email. We can get you some very good domestically grown aromatic brands that we have here stateside. U.S. grown rice is also in many of the largest pet and animal feed labels. Some of the people don't know this, but 3 of the largest beer brands use U.S. grown rice and have for decades: Bud Light, Budweiser, and Michelob Ultra. And more sake breweries are now sourcing U.S. grown products and brewed right here in the United States. Our domestic promotions team does work to increase consumption on our table, but we fully support U.S. rice products in the liquid form as well. As you can see in the photo, we do have 6 major rice producing states. Just south of this arrow is Memphis, Tennessee. I realized I missed the mark just a little bit after the slide was in. But Memphis is just across the Mississippi River from the largest of the rice producing state. Arkansas grows on average half of all U.S. production. You all will get to see some of the great production practices and a lot of the rice as you commute between stops just west of Memphis on your upcoming tour. Next slide. So 5 or so years ago, our Rice Stewardship Partnership, our good friend Dr. Scott Manley with Ducks Unlimited and our Rice Foundation, which is the research arm of our organization, decided it was time to take a look back as an industry. You don't know where to go unless you know how far you've come. And we produced a U.S. rice industry sustainability report that was put together, and we found some interesting insight. We did use Field to Market's National Indicators report and saw that in the last 36 years, a lot has changed. We are a 100% irrigated crop, but are now using half of the amount of water, 34% less energy. We've lowered our greenhouse gas emissions by 41%, our soil loss by 28%, and increased land efficiency by 39%. Like many industries, this is due to a combination of efforts with our public and private research and development scientists, of course, our forward-thinking producers on the ground, and efforts to get practices and assistance on the ground to producers to facilitate change from groups like this and our Rice Stewardship Partnership. Next slide. So not only do we feed and hydrate people and pets, we do feed and house ducks and geese. Our rice fields lie under the most heavily traveled flyway systems in North America. So in the wintertime, our rice fields are like a big shallow bathtub. So they plug the drain up, they catch the rainwater. Those shallow fields not only give birds necessary habitat, but a lot of that grain that the machines didn't pick up are calories for those traveling birds in the wintertime. Scott and Adam will talk a little bit more about this later, but while you're here, you will not get a chance to see those birds that visit in the winter, but please do come back when it cools off. It is quite the sight to see. Those familiar with the ag industry, habitat discussions typically revolve around edge of field practices. Rice is different because in the winter, though, our entire field changes into a surrogate wetland. So our entire field offers invaluable habitat for ducks and geese and other water birds. Next slide. our rice production cycle. So each state is a little different, but since you all will be in Arkansas, we'll stick with this one for today. So right now, about 95% of our rice is planted. What hasn't been is likely due to some wet conditions. We had a good dry spell followed by some consistent rain for the last 3 weeks. But unlike some states like California, very little here in the Mid-South is air seeded or dropped from an airplane. So dry conditions are a must to get it drilled into the ground. If rain holds off, you all will see rice irrigation on your visit. Traditionally, rice irrigation is done in a shallow flooded environment, though furrow irrigated rice, or also called row rice, does continue to grow in popularity, which you will learn about on the farms you'll be visiting. Harvest begins in August, and most of the grain is out of the field by October 1st. That grain either goes to a mill for immediate processing, a third-party storage facility. Some of it goes directly on the Mississippi River on a barge as rough rice. But every year we do see on-farm storage capacity increase. So some now have the ability to hold it and market it at different times throughout the year. Next slide, please. Quick industry impact. We did help conduct a study a few years back at Texas A&M that found that one rice farm will contribute $1 million to their local economy. That number does include, the urbanites that travel to our rural communities for outdoor recreation in the off season. So rice goes away, so does some of that difficult to find connection between our city residents and our ag communities. We have folks flying in from all over the world to hunt our birds here in the Mid-South. In and around our rice fields, that education component and the narrowing of that gap between the urban and our rural communities that naturally occurs during those visits is really valuable. Where you will be in Arkansas, the rice industry provides more than 25,000 jobs, $6 billion annually to the state's economy, and donates more than 250,000 pounds of rice annually to combat food insecurity. Arkansas is not a big state, so this is a very big impact. A more you know fact, Arkansas was home of the world's largest rice mill for many years up until recently. Next slide. So this slide shows rice production, how it stacks up across the state of Arkansas. So Graceland is across the mighty Mississippi from Crittenden County, which is in the orange there, kind of towards the north. As you guys cross and travel into Arkansas, you will be going slightly north of there. And as you can see, those will be, you'll be within some of the largest rice producing counties in the state. And my last slide. So this shows the historical rice production in Arkansas. That last uptick there with the white, that is a projection for this year. So in 2024, as you can see in this, record input cost and our challenging market environments created an out of the norm 2 down years a row in 22 and 23. Our industry's kind of been in a tough spot the last few years, so a bounce back should be much needed, shot in the arm for our infrastructure this year. About 98% of the rice grown here in Arkansas does so in a rotation with soybeans. So I think that will help explain some of the consistent up and downs each year. And that concludes my brief report. I'm going to turn this over to our good friend, Adam Herges. Thank you for the opportunity and look forward to seeing you all and hosting you in Rice Country very soon.
Thank you, Josh. And good morning, everyone. My name's Adam Herges. I am the Sustainability Agronomist Advisor for the Mosaic Company. Mosaic is a fertilizer company. We sell 2 different products of dry granular fertilizer, phosphate and potash. And we also are now selling biologicals as well. Our goal as a company is to increase nutrient use efficiency, help out farmers with profitability as well as the retail sector, and continue to create intensified, sustainable intensification of remaining ag lands so that we aren't expanding into new land through land conversion. We need to use the land that we currently have for food production. My role at Mosaic, I'm based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I lead all of our 4R nutrient stewardship, strategic partnerships, as well as our strategy for North America, and also support some of our initiatives around water quality or even water quantity in other regions around the world. Mosaic distributes fertilizer to about 40 different countries on an annual basis. But our main partners and long-term partners are based here in North America as well as South America, where we have a much larger presence. Also within Mosaic, I sit on a number of boards. So I am currently the chair of CTIC's board, and will hopefully continue in that role for the next 2 years. As well as representing Mosaic on a multitude of other boards across North America. But today I'm going to talk about, why the private industry is invested in the Rice Stewardship Partnership. Why did we come to the table almost 11 years ago? Mosaic has been a part of this program for a long time. We were one of the initial companies that jumped on board. And as you will see through my presentation, this partnership really captures the entire supply chain for rice. So it's a very unique partnership that you don't quite see with other agricultural partnerships in other regions around the US, where they've actually captured everybody along the supply chain. So I want to reiterate, why Ducks Unlimited and USA Rice, along with the private industry partners, started this program a long time ago. Well, the main reason is rice, as Josh pointed out, is an important stable crop for global populations, but also the US industry. And the interesting thing is these managed fields can also become wetlands if managed properly after harvest. And about 50% of migrating waterfowl actually pass over these regions. And so if you think about, the last 200 years in the US, we've seen a decline in wetland habitat. Those numbers range from 80% loss or even closer to 90. And we've realized over the last 100 years that, wetlands have an important provide important ecosystem services on the landscape. But rice is critically important, not only from a stable crop, but also we can manage it as a wetland. So I tend to think as rice country as sort of the kidneys of the Mississippi River Basin, right? They do a very good job taking sediment if farmers are running surface runoff or just gradual flow of bayou water going into these systems, and they really act as a kidney on the landscape, not only providing food production, but also habitat for migratory waterfowl. If we had to transition away from rice, we're looking at possibly $3.5 billion that would be needed to manage these rice acres into natural wetlands. So we're actually getting a win-win situation here by allowing farmers to continue to farm and provide nutritious food for a growing population, a growing global population, but also providing habitat for wildlife as well. And so you look across different cropping systems, the biodiversity impact is tremendous within rice systems. And so, this partnership is one that Mosaic views as one of our flagship partnerships because of the scale, because of the impact, and the diversity of stakeholders that are involved in this partnership. When you think about this partnership compared to others, right now, the Rice Stewardship Partnership has about 24 field staff that are on the ground. So these field staff are working directly with farmers. They are helping those farmers work through cost share programs to help incentivize and change practices as science becomes better and more robust. And our way of thinking about how can we pull more bushels per acre out of the landscape while continuing to go down our continuous sustainability journey with these growers. How do we continue to make them profitable while also balancing the need for biodiversity, water quality, water quantity. But the key thing is, how do we continue to make these farmers, US rice growers, continue to be profitable? Because as Josh pointed out, rice has been here for hundreds and hundreds of years, and we don't see that changing in the future, but we need to continue to help out the farmers so that they can have a long-standing sustainable business into the future, and also an operation to hand down to their the next generation. So 24 field staff on the ground working with farmers, but that doesn't quite totally capture the amount of people that are involved. Obviously, you know, Josh and Scott Manley are leading it from both of their organizations as a partnership and collaboration. But there's also a number of staff, both at USA Rice and Ducks Unlimited, that are working behind the scenes supporting this program, as well as it's a farmer-led partnership as well. So both organizations have a farmer committee. These farmer leaders are dedicating their time to the cause to make sure that we continue building a robust program and supporting farmers' profitability as well as their sustainability journey. So when you think about the scale of this partnership, it's pretty remarkable. You know, they are capturing and impacting almost a third of rice acres. So Josh mentioned, you know, typically annually, we have anywhere from, you know, 2.5 million acres of rice all the way up to 3 million acres. I like to use 3 million acres as sort of the average amount of rice acres that are planted and harvested every year in the US, bearing Mother Nature. If Mother Nature holds out well, we can capture and harvest all those acres. So when you think about other partnerships, I can't even think of another partnership where they have almost a third of the acres covered in one cropping system. So pretty tremendous work that has been underway and has been led by USA Rice and DU. But it's really about, you know, the partners, right, that are involved. So when this partnership started, it was really an idea of how can we support rice farmers and also wildlife habitat were sort of the two key pillars of this partnership. And so as you look on this slide here, you can see a whole swath of stakeholders along the supply chain. Many of them are actually purchasing rice for different food products. Some are providing recommendations and agronomic expertise to rice growers. Some include grain elevators, middle of the supply chain, that are taking that rice, processing it for the various different food products. And then as well as input suppliers, right, like Mosaic Fertilizer Company and others that support this initiative. And it's been going on for like I said, about 11 years. The thing that I look at when I look at various partnerships is the scalability, and do we have enough boots on the ground? So a lot of the partnerships from the private sector that are involved are providing technical assistance. And then Ducks Unlimited and USA Rice leverage those commitments for the financial assistance that's needed to help drive further adoption or to tweak a farmer's management operation so that we can continue to feed in the best available science and the best available best management practices for their sustainability journey. So kind of unique in that aspect, but not quite. I know a lot of partnerships also leverage USDA dollars for financial assistance. But this has been sort of the hallmark partnership in the lower Mississippi River Basin, where I kind of feel there's not a lot of love down in the lower Mississippi River Basin. You know, most of the projects are in the upper Midwest, corn and soybean acres, but this is definitely one of the premier partnerships in the South. And if you attend the tour, and I encourage you to attend the tour, CTIC does an amazing job putting together a premier conservation tour to really get hands-on experience with actual farm families that are running operations. You get to see the conservation practices that are implemented. You get to sort of pull open the curtains and look at, you know, how do they run their operation on a day-to-day basis? What goes into the thought process around which chemical inputs do they use? Which fertilizer do they use? The machinery, the equipment. It's pretty fascinating to be a part of this tour. So I encourage you to sign up for the tour if you haven't already, and to come join us in several weeks in June to see some of these rice operations firsthand. With that, I am going to pass it to Dr. Scott Manley to sort of round us out and bring us to the finish line. So, Scott.
Great. Thank you, Adam. Thumbs up if y'all can hear me. Good. Just wanted to make sure. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for your time today in the CTIC webinar. And we really appreciate CTIC's interest in our work, our rice industry work, and sort of picking Memphis and Northeast Arkansas as their annual tour spot this year. So we have several staff that have been working hard to organize the tour, make sure we can see as much as possible, cover just as many farms, as many unique practices and families and farming operations and relationships. You know, agriculture is a fascinating place, and we want to introduce you all to Northeast Arkansas and all it has to offer. So thank you to Patrick Dill, who's on the call, Misty Adams. You'll see them along with others, and looking forward to a great tour here in just a few weeks. So I often get asked, you know, so great, we're doing great things. We've got a decade under our belt, touched a third of the rice acres, invested tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in financial assistance for improvements. And people ask me all the time, so what's next? You know, where's rice stewardship going, you know, in the next 10 or 11 years? And I want to just sort of hold back that question for a second, because truthfully, we're not done doing what we've done for the last 10 years. And some of the fundamentals of these type public-private ag supply chain, whatever you want to call, how you're going to characterize the partnership, but you know, there's some fundamentals on how to set these things up for a long track, for a long, you know, multi-decade progress, and hopefully fostering transformation in the rice supply chain. And the structure, as Adam and both Josh said, of how we have things set up is not unique, but it's not easy either. And but once you get it going, it's kind of like a flywheel, momentum, and the progress continues. And you got to start off with the producer advisory committee. You always tell my staff, my coworkers, it's like, if we're having a meeting on what we should do on rice farms and there's no rice farmers in the room, you're wasting your time. You're coming up with all these great things that we should do that somebody else is going to have to lead, decide, incorporate, those sorts of things. When you have a farm and on-farm program, you have to have farmers at the table. And we have a great advisory committee. It's getting bigger all the time. Used to be 2 people per state, but we couldn't say no as others wanted to join. And my hat's off to Josh Hankins for managing a committee now that tends to be getting bigger by the day. We had 12. I think we're it's hard to keep up with how many we have now. We don't tell anybody no, but the producer input is pivotal. It's you cannot go without it. The next thing is we are on the foundation or on the support of the U.S. Department of Agriculture and mostly its Natural Resources Conservation Service. And why wouldn't you be? They've got a conservation network established as early as like the late 1930s in the Dust Bowl era. There's a county office in every county we work in, and there's one in every county y'all work in across the United States as well. And then it's also back, those counties have a soil and water conservation district, which again is farmers from that county that serve on their boards. And that is your info, the place to bounce your ideas, bounce your needs, once again connects you to the producer. So the USDA has a framework that partnerships should take advantage of. On top of the framework is they have all kinds of additional funding for technical assistance, financial incentives, and I'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But it's essentially at this day and time under this political leadership, the amount of funding available for conservation is at an all-time high. Then we have our field team. Adam showed you the map earlier. I've had several folks in the past ask me, well, how can we get all this work done without having all these people? And my answer to that is you can't. If you're going to work on farms, you have to have people facing face to face with farmers. It's one farm at a time. You got to meet them where they are. Some are far ahead, some aren't as far ahead. It takes time. It takes a lot of touches. It takes a lot of steps to do on-farm conservation. And if you want to skip having a managing and hiring and keeping a trained field team, you want to try to get out of that, you can forget it, in my opinion. So you got to have that talent on the ground, and it's got to be long track, consistent, committed to meeting the producer where they are and moving them forward. And then there's the supply chain, including Mosaic. We're fortunate enough to have really, really powerful partners on both ends of the supply chain, the input side and the consumer side. And what's a perfect supply chain partner? It's somebody that I say is willing to commit their treasures, their time, and their talent, and get the same in return from the partnership. It can't just be a one-way deal. And so people like myself and Josh and others have to spend time working with these supply chain partners to make sure that the value is commensurate, it is shared. And you hit that sweet spot, as we've been fortunate enough to do with Mosaic, Anheuser-Busch, Entergy, our biggest electric company, Nestle Purina, who will be at the tour. You hit that spot and you can go for a pretty long journey together. And I'm privileged and pleased that that is occurring in this partnership. So I just want to, those, you have to have the producer foundation, advisory committee, USDA is your friend, field team is non-replaceable. You cannot do this stuff without boots on the ground, and a supply chain set of supporters from one end to the other rounds you out to a very, very powerful and productive team. Go ahead, Adam, to that next slide. And lots of lines here, but in this case, they actually bring home the point that I wanted to make is, I'm going to talk about this a couple of times, but the amount of funding that's available for on-farm conservation today is at a level that it has never come close to. It is the NRCS offices across the country through Inflation Reduction Act and other climate smart investments and other legislation in the last, since COVID basically, have put as much as 10 times, tenfold the amount of funding into USDA and many other ag-related government agencies than there would have been before COVID. 10 times the funding. Think about that. And naturally, there's a little stress on the system in getting that all effectively delivered. And so we have been quite skilled at applying for different funding sources and moving that into this project. all the green is basically grants that we have delivered. The practices on the ground may not be 100% finished yet because they're for multiple years, but let's just say that the money through all of these grants, about 110 million worth, is already in a contract with a. And then just recently, we were fortunate enough to land a large climate smart grant again that was for 80 million, of which about 65 will go on the ground. And that is just now getting started. So we basically are running a machine here to bring extra funding to rice producers and make on-farm improvements and practice adjustments for a better operation for efficiency and their bottom line. But again, there's still even more funding within the NRCS offices we need to help deliver. And then there's even more funding that goes through other programs, not within USDA, state-based programs perhaps, that needs to be delivered. So the pool is deep. It's a deep pool to swim in right now, but there is, used to always ask, gee, if we only had the funding. Well, the funding's here, and now it's time to get the work done. So, okay, Adam, to the next slide. These next couple of slides, I just wanted to give you an idea of, so what is this? You got a field team. So what do they do? What exactly are they doing? And what more do we need them to do going forward? And I think it's the perfect field person doesn't really have to have this long tenured education in ag conservation. They have to have relationships. This is Richard Hardy, who's actually a farmer. And he decided to rent his farm ground out, let somebody else farm it, and come work for us. Who could have come up with a better person? Knows the farmers already, knows what an efficient farm can look like, knows what he wishes the farms could look like. And he's one of our most talented folks down in Gaydon, Louisiana. I probably didn't say Gaydon right. Somebody can correct me later. But Richard's been with us for about 5 years. Like I said, leases out about 900 acres of his own farm ground, and has kind of quasi-retired and come to help us and help farmers improve their operations. And the next picture is one of our newer, younger staff, Ethan Hankins, and Ethan's a veteran of the Marines. It's just out of the Marines here about a year ago, and got his GIS degree, and he has become our expert on the irrigation technology. If it has something to do with the phone and programming your instruments and running the farm in a more modern, automated way, he's there to help you do it. Next slide. Okay, so a couple more points I'll bring us around the bend here is, people again ask me, so what are we going to do different? How's Rice Stewardship going to adapt, adjust, pivot, continue to grow and continue to go forward? And I guess what we hear, over the years is, the water quality becomes the focus, and the hypoxia zone and the hypoxia task force, and then that kind of gets quiet. And then we have the next grant that comes out that wants more conservation planning and more science behind the practices and more data behind the outcomes of the work. And then the next round of interest comes, and it's all about greenhouse gas reduction. That's where we are today, and climate change. And then there's, what are we going to do with rural economies? And then what about nature loss and biodiversity? And sort of the themes kind of keep swirling. But in this picture here shows, where we really kind of honed in on our water quality differences here. The water coming on the fields on the left side, and as you look at your screen, and the water coming off the rice fields on your right side. I mean, there's our water quality and our nutrient management benefits right there. But you got to come up with a set of practices and set of farm improvements that really benefit all of those things. But when you put your grants together, and really they also have to benefit the bottom line. Anything that's neutral to costly, don't come out ahead on. You have to make up for something that's you do come out ahead on. And so you have to click all these things to the economics of the farm, to the bottom line, to the risk management, to the efficiency of the operation, to the complexity of the operation. And the practices that we typically employ, help all of these things. And so, you don't want to start splitting things that this is a water quality project, or this is a greenhouse gas project, or this is a biodiversity project. It's not. It's a system. It's a farm system. It's a systems approach project, and it needs to benefit or neutralize all of these things that we're talking about. So, we may show what's new in our grant writing and our communications and our marketing of our program, but behind all of that, we're still taking care of the farm, all of its attributes, and looking at a systems approach and an improvement in the bottom line. It's no change from that. All right, next slide, Adam. So one more time, we're asked the questions, what's next? What's next? And there actually are some things that are next, and they're big, and we're learning what to do to participate and to improve and to make better these couple of things I want to leave you with as we end. And one is like, are you going to always run your program off of government funding or the leverage model, where we take $1 of philanthropy or investment from the supply chain, turn it into $10 of USDA funds? Or you can always run it that way? And the answer is yes, we're always going to run it that way. But there is also the market-based support side of things. And I'm no expert on it, but all of y'all know it's coming. And Walmart, who's been a supporter of this project, has its own now rice farm incentive program that's run with Indigo. All the rice goes through one particular mill that they buy from. It's not the only one they buy from, but one that they buy from. And they are starting to pilot their own sort of market-based incentives on top of the price they pay for the rice for these conservation measures. So it's a non-government program, which is great. Nestle Purina, another partner in this project, is doing the same thing with a local rice mill, one of the bigger rice mills, a technology company named Arva. They are offering incentives for rice that ends up in their supply chain for their pet foods, and they're starting their own market-based, again, completely outside of any government type programs. And I think these sort of partnerships will continue. We support those. We'll provide the staff, the outreach to farmers. That whole market-based side of things is great. And this Climate Smart project that we are embarking on has a big market-based component to it. And Josh and USA Rice, representing the consumer side of the supply chain, are going to use their power and their membership there to explore even more growth in the market-based or market-supported side of things. To me, it's a wide open frontier, not an expert on it, but I don't think you choose one or the other. You don't choose whether you're an NRCS leverage, USDA leverage-based program, or you're a market-based program. I don't think people in our positions choose that. We want both. I'd like to see them both vibrant, powerful, and operating, and able to reach all producers. So we'll continue to support the market-based side of things, but exactly what does that look like going forward? We're all learning together. And the last thing I'll leave you with is the diversity, equity, and inclusion side of things. So what can you do? What should you do to grow your program in that regard? And again, this is a frontier we're no experts on, but we're still sticking our chin out there and getting started. The biggest partner that we've added to Rice Stewardship just recently is the National Black Growers Council. Fortunately, it's based right smack in the middle of Arkansas. And we have several special avenues in the Climate Smart Grant incentives and farm improvements that we're going to do that are be specific for members of the National Black Growers Council and growers that they identify. So again, it's a new frontier, exactly what to do with it and how to be good at it and how to do something meaningful, long lasting. We're learning as we go. And we're really learning as we go. And the council and its leadership has been fantastic. Many of them in this picture shown right here. So I'll go ahead and wrap up with that. Adam did a great job of saying why Ducks Unlimited is so determined to keep the rice industry strong and on the landscape. It's 3 million acres of habitat that cannot be lost. Adam, that's it for me.
Yeah, before we jump into Q&A, Scott, do you mind just maybe giving a snapshot of some of the practices that have been implemented through the financial assistance?
Yes. So when we started this, this was really fun. When we got together and started all this, the first thing you do is you basically get a farm budget. You get a farm budget and look at it. What's that got to do with conservation? Well, we just talked about all that. You get the farm budget and you look at what it takes to grow an acre of rice. These days, it costs $700 to grow an acre of rice of your annual input cost, not capital cost, just, the annualized input cost, $700 an acre. Think about that. And about a quarter of that is in the energy, mostly the energy related to irrigation, the diesel and electricity required for irrigation. And then the other quarter is in the crop nutrients, Adam. It's probably no surprise there. And a lot of that is nitrogen. Rice is nitrogen hungry. So that took us to irrigation efficiency management, nutrient management, thanks to your tutoring, Adam. And then, of course, the wildlife side of thing, which is so important to Ducks Unlimited, but that's really not in that annual input budget. So we started our first project out where we want to practice A, B, and C for irrigation, A, B, and C for nutrient management, A, B, and C for wildlife habitat. The biggest irrigation management type practices is to know how much water you're putting on, is to be able to measure it, and then to be able to have some sort of devices that will turn the water on and off without human error being in the middle of it. So let's just say mechanical automation or some simple irrigation management automation. Nutrient management, Adam, you taught us all about that. There's the nitrogen side, there's the phosphate potash side, there's all the micronutrient side of things. So we do the USDA's nutrient management practices, which is using a retailer, grid sampling, variable rate prescriptions on the nitrogen, making sure you're not using more than the crop actually needs. You can really cut your costs by cutting a little bit of nitrogen use. I know the nitrogen fertilizer companies don't want to hear me say that, but you can. And then the wildlife management. And then now on top of the practices, best management practices, we do a lot of infrastructure work. And again, that's with irrigation automation, pipeline distribution, surface water, using the drainage water for irrigation before you use groundwater, tailwater storage and tailwater recovery pits, which is essentially just making a drainage ditch something that'll hold water so you can reuse it. And those kind of land leveling. Another really important practice is using the poly pipe from Delta Plastics for sort of micro delivery of the water to the rice, which cuts your water use, easily by a third. They call it multiple inlet irrigation or poly pipe irrigation. But you focus on those key drivers, and that focuses on the key environmental issues as well: water quality, water quantity, energy use. Again, those connections, I say, are integral to this kind of work.
Yeah, and some of the farmers also have a livestock component to their rice fields. They actually have crawfish that they pull in. So if you ever go to a crawdad or a crawfish boil, that may be coming from a rice farmer, most likely. So with that, thank you, Dr. Scott Manley. Thank you, Josh Hankins. I think, Callie, we will move it into Q&A portion of this. And thank you all to the attendees for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much. And a lot of the stuff that we talked about today, we have more people coming to the tour to kind of touch on and explain, and you'll get to see it in action. So we do have a few questions. Some have been answered, and I might have Josh go back over them just so everyone can hear. But we have a question right now, and it's what is of greatest importance to the rice community in the upcoming Farm Bill?
I know we're here to, and I'll go ahead and jump in, but please support my answer if you like. I know we're here to talk about conservation, and that is those programs in the Farm Bill are absolutely important to our rice community. But staying in business is most important, and our farmers rely on Title I and the price and income support that is included in Title I, and some of those figures and numbers really haven't changed since the 14 Farm Bill, which were formulated in, I think, 2012, leading up to the 2014 Farm Bill. So updates on some of those price and income support services that Farm Bill provides, I think would likely be unanimously answered as the most important for our rice farming community across all 6 states.
Yeah, and I would just add as well is even the research title in the Farm Bill is critically important. If you look at other countries around the world, countries like China, they're spending 3 times more dollars in funding into agricultural research in the US. And so it's critically important that we continue the Farm Bill, but also increase funding so that we can continue to be the leading country in the world and be the lead agricultural sector in the world as well.
Awesome. Thank you both for your answers. And then another question that I really liked that I think deserves some more airtime is what are some of the key challenges and opportunities facing rice farmers in Arkansas, particularly in terms of sustainability and environmental conservation?
And I'll start because I did put it in the chat too. I don't know if that's public, but 100% of rice is irrigated. And that's different from a lot of crops that are out there. Some of our irrigation efficiencies that a lot of rice farmers are participating in now that save water and possibly lower your greenhouse gas emissions. To do those require significant on-farm investments, precision land leveling, pads and pipes. And so getting to that stage to be able to do some of these irrigation efficiencies, I think is one of the largest hurdles that we see. That, and I also think just water management, on-farm storage, to be able to store water on your farm, which more and more producers are trying to do so. You're taking land out of production, and possibly digging and building a large reservoir that can cost upwards of $500,000. That would be my answer.
Yeah, and Josh, I would just maybe add to that. This might not be a key challenge, but when we're talking about sustainability and environmental outcomes, some of the challenges that we see in the rice industry is how do we capture those, right? And the research around driving, switching from one practice to another, and what does that impact, right? And so you look across the US and, there's been a lot of investment, a lot of research dollars invested into some of the major other crops, corn, soybean, and wheat. And you look at the support of the land grant universities that support those 3 crops versus you look at rice, a much smaller, though very important footprint from an acreage perspective, but there's not, there's only several land grant universities that are focused on rice. And so one of the areas that I've been working with this partnership on is how do we increase the amount of funding going into research for rice systems so that we can actually capture those outcomes that are important to the ag supply chain, right? And also those metrics can also help the farmer understand whether the practices that they're implementing, not only from a profitability standpoint, but is it helping to sustain the business for the long term as well when you're looking at soil loss, nutrient cycling, water management, right? And so that it may not be the biggest issue because I think Josh laid those out perfectly, But it is an issue that, you know, we're trying to focus on through this partnership is getting at those outcomes.
Awesome. Thank you, all three of you so much for joining this webinar and for just being here today. I learned a lot personally. I think the rest of the group did too. And I hope that everyone does join us in Arkansas for the tour where you can learn more and get to talk to these guys one-on-one. So with that, I am going to start ending the webinar. Thank you guys again for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you at the tour.
Thank y'all.